Today we're taking a little bit more general route and we're going to look at what the pelvic floor actually is. The pelvic floor is some term that gets thrown around in conventional fitness, in healthcare, and a lot of us are just left in the dark about one of the most important parts of our bodies, and we're being made to think that certain things are common are normal, when in fact they're not normal, they're just really common. And if something feels kind of off down there, it probably is, even if your OBGYN or your MD are telling you that everything's normal. So today we're going to explore what the pelvic floor is in relation to women's health, what it does, and common issues that I see that women are being told are normal when in fact they're not at all. They're just really common, and you can absolutely get help for these beyond masking them with band-aid fixes and getting endless surgeries. So for all intents and purposes, I am only trained in women's pelvic floor dysfunction. So we're speaking about those of you who have a vagina. Male pelvic floor health is a thing. It is a realm of physical therapy. There's just specialized training in addition to women's pelvic floor health to receive as well. And I do not have that training background, and I'm not going to pretend like I do. So, for all of those of you with a vagina, stick around. So let's talk about what exactly the pelvic floor is first. And I brought out my model. As you can see, it's missing from the shelf up there. But here we go. So everybody with a pelvis has a pelvic floor, including men. But like I said before, this is for those of you with a vagina. That's who we're talking about today. So from this model, this is your pelvis, and your hip sockets are here and your lower back is here. So the first cautionary tale I tell people is that if something is being written off as a hip problem or a lower back problem and it just doesn't feel right to you, like there's something deeper going on, there probably is. And it could be something going on with your pelvic floor. Because of the close proximity of your spine and your hip, these pelvic floor issues often go missed and misdiagnosed as something else going on. So for example, something I see a lot in my experience is somebody will have, say, groin pain or pain with sex, or they can't really hold in their pee very well and they're leaking, and they get an x-ray done and it's showing arthritis in the spine or arthritis in the hip, and that their issues are being linked to that. Not true. Arthritis is normal wear and tear on the body. It's not always indicative of a deep issue going on. It's can happen in people as early as in their 20s. So the fact that pelvic floor issues are being dismissed and being blamed on arthritis is a load of garbage, and I have no tolerance for it. So that's a cautionary tale. Also why you need to watch this video, because if you're not educated on a part of your body that you own and that might be causing dysfunction elsewhere and vice versa, you're not really in a prime place to question things that are being given as excuses, or things that you're being told to accept that you just don't have to accept, and it's just a load of garbage. So that's why I'm doing this video, to make sure that you're armed with all the information that you need about a part of your body that isn't always the most talked about. What exactly is the pelvic floor? This is a model of a pelvic floor with a vagina, and what we're seeing here are the organs that live inside. So the pelvic floor musculature has three functions. Sexual function, so aiding in good sex, a good sex life, orgasm, healthy, all of that good stuff. Sphincter control, so the ability to hold your urine, hold your poop, release both of those to get rid of waste and all of that. And then support. So support for your internal organs. Now, what we're looking at here are three main organs that sit in the pelvic floor. For women, we have the bladder here, we have the uterus if you have one, and we have the rectum in the back. So if you're being told like, oh damn, women can never hold their pee as long as men, you're damn right we can't, because we have a uterus taking up space in the pelvic floor, and look how it's sitting right above the bladder. So our bladders don't have the most room to expand the way a male's would. So that's a little tidbit fact for you today. Now let's take all of these organs out here, and we're going to look at what the musculature looks like. So inside you can see there's musculature, and like I said before, there's 3 layers to that musculature depending upon how deep you go. Typically we as pelvic floor PTs, we assess roundabout based on where our knuckles are. So the deepest goes down to the first knuckle, the second layer goes to the second knuckle, and the most superficial, or the one closest to the entryway, is the first knuckle. So that's just a little tidbit there. But yeah, all that pink stuff is muscles. You also have nerves that live in there, as well as ligaments, and then you could see from the underside what that looks like over here. So just like every other muscular structure in our body, our muscles inside of the pelvic floor need to be able to move within a certain range of motion. So we need to be able to relax them. And this is something that really goes overlooked, and nobody knows that this is a thing, because we're told that we need to do kegels for 1,000 times a day for the rest of our lives in order to have a proper functioning pelvic floor. And this enrages me, and I legit see red when I hear this all the time, because this is so far from the case. It's very, very dismissive and very, very negligent. So just like we're not doing endless curls with our biceps all the time, we want to be able to fully straighten that arm. Same thing with the pelvic floor. You want to be able to take it through that fully relaxed position and then contract it. So relaxing is way different than what's called bearing down. Bearing down is when you're actively pushing as if you're trying to have a bowel movement, or if you've had a vaginal delivery, pushing the baby. It's not like that. It's literally relaxing. And I heard something the other day on Instagram where it was like trying to blow bubbles through a straw if you had a straw in the opening of your vagina, which I actually like this analogy a lot. Way better than the flower blooming, because you don't need a ton of force to blow bubbles through a straw, right? It's very, very slight. You still get the air out. You still can visualize what's happening. So that's kind of what your pelvic floor should be able to do by itself, is relax as well as contract. Another reason why kegels aren't always the best, like, we don't know if you're doing them correctly. So it's not just sitting there and squeezing, because a lot of people are like, what am I doing? So a common thing that I see in my practice, I'll ask a woman like, oh, well, what have you been doing for your pelvic floor? And she's like, oh, my doctor gave me kegels. I'm like, okay, well, show me. And it's like a deer in headlights. She doesn't know what to do. And then when she does go to show me, she's either scrunching her arms, clenching her jaw, she's holding her breath, she's squeezing her butt, she's clenching her thighs together, like squeezing her inner thighs together. And all of these are compensatory mechanisms for a pelvic floor that's probably not operating at its optimal efficiency. And that's a big thing that I see in the community. Don't think that kegling your way through the rest of your life is going to help you stop leaking or help you stop having to go to the bathroom when only a few drips come out and everything in between. But speaking of that, let's talk about what happens when our pelvic floor is not the most conditioned. So things, we already spoke about leakage, right? So this could be anything from leaking a few drops to full on needing to change your pants, because whether it be urine or whether it be poop, it's just coming out and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Even if it's just a couple of drops, that's still an issue. Don't let anybody tell you that this is normal, regardless of how old you are and regardless of how many kids you've had. It's never normal, even a few drops. Never normal. There's help. You could have a tightness issue. You could have a weakness issue. You could have an endurance issue. You can have a combination of all of these. And the fact of the matter is, this is not to crap on OBGYNs or MDs, but they don't have the same training that someone like me has, where they can assess your muscular performance. They can tell if there's anything deeper going on, like an infection or something like that, but they cannot assess how your muscles are actually performing. So that's something that I can help you with, or a pelvic floor PT can help you with. And that's really important. I think that's a sticking point for a lot of people, because they'll get hung up on this fact that, oh, well, my OBGYN said everything was fine down there. And it's fine. Like, it's healthy. It's just not the most conditioned. Like, so that's just something to really keep in mind, and know that you're not going crazy, or it's not something that you have to deal with for the rest of your life, or it's not something that only surgery will fix, because there are options like pelvic floor physical therapy. So leaking is one issue that can happen. Another thing is urgency, or feeling like you have to go to the bathroom, and then when you sit down, nothing really comes out. And this is assuming you've been cleared of any kind of infection, including STIs. What could be happening is that your pelvic floor muscles aren't the best at relaxing. So they kind of signal you that you have to go when you don't really have to go. And this is definitely something that a pelvic floor physical therapist can help you with. Another thing is constipation. We never think that there's anything beyond diet that can relate to constipation. And this could also be a tightness issue in the pelvic floor. Because remember where that rectum sits. So, he's falling all over the place. But there he is. See all that musculature surrounding the rectum? If that's tight, it could keep things from flowing as freely as you want it to when you have to take a poop. And the other thing is, if your pelvic floor is kind of like while you're pooping, your pelvic floor should be relaxing to allow the poop out. If it's clenching those sphincter muscles and you're not able to relax them to allow the poop to flow out, then this is something that a pelvic floor physical therapist can absolutely help you with. Another really common issue is this idea of pelvic organ prolapse. And a lot of women freak out because this is literally an organ coming out of your vaginal opening here. So it might feel like a heaviness, or like a tampon's been sitting in there for a while. It might not be in every position you assume. So you might feel it only when you're standing or only when you're jumping. And when you go to look, you'll see something kind of like hanging there. And again, like with all those organs that are inside, you could have the bladder itself prolapse, you can have the uterus prolapse, you can have the rectum prolapse, and they were all sitting in this kind of valley here. So I'm trying to see. So then the vaginal opening is right there where the uterus is. So you can see how those can kind of like migrate. And if it's not the most supportive in there, they can protrude through the opening. Now, another thing, a lot of women are being told that surgery is the only option, regardless of how small their prolapse is. So prolapses are graded by how much that organ is coming out of the opening. And I'm not saying that pelvic floor PT will fix like a grade 4 prolapse, which is it's a pretty considerable prolapse, but I am saying that it could potentially, depending on what your muscular function looks like, it could potentially help with not having a surgery, potentially. I always say everything should be conservatively treated first by someone who's well versed in things like this before surgery is thought of at all. But the problem is not a lot of people know that people like myself are out there who can help avoid things like surgery. Another issue that could happen if your pelvic floor muscles aren't the most optimally performing would be pain with sex or pain with penetration. So whether that be a finger, whether that be a toy, whether that be a penis, it's just not happening. And women, again, are being told this is normal, especially if they've had a child, and this is not normal. There's absolutely help. This is not something that kegels will fix. Though kegels could actually potentially make the problem or contribute to the problem, because it's a relaxation issue, most likely. Again, if I haven't assessed you, so I don't really know what's going on. But in my experience, the pelvic floor is having a difficult time relaxing. So this is something that you could get help with beyond shoving dilators in there and being told to just relax, being told to have a drink. It doesn't work like that. There's something that's not right with your brain body map, as I like to call it. So your nervous system is in hyperdrive. It doesn't know how to relax. Your pelvic floor doesn't know how to relax. So this is a lot of what we work on. So that's something that I really want you to think of, especially if you have things like hypermobility issues, right? So because remember when we talked before that the pelvic floor is in such close proximity to the lower back and the hip muscles or the hip joints here, if you're not the most stable, you have a hypermobility issue, meaning you could get into crazy positions or your joints pop out of place. Or even if you're not the most strongest in your back or your hips, your pelvic floor being the epicenter of all of that could take on some of the pressure. So it could be fighting for stability and get overactive. It could not be working the most optimally, especially if you have a range of motion issue. So your hips are really tight, your pelvic floor could in turn get really tight, or it could be weak. So everything feeds off each other. We don't work as individual parts. We work as an entire system, and that's how our body parts work together, despite what a lot of insurance companies want us to believe. It just doesn't work like that. Everything is related. So if you're sitting there nodding your head about this and you're like, that sounds like something I'm going through, check out the link in the notes below. I'm going to attach my free Pelvic Pride ebook. This will have a printout of what the pelvic floor is, what it does, and then the 4 common issues I see that women are being told are normal when they're not normal at all, and there is help beyond wearing black leggings for the rest of your life, wearing pads for the rest of your life, getting these ridiculous surgeries, or just grinning and bearing things that you know just don't feel right and are pretty much like deteriorating your quality of life. So make sure you grab that. If you are in the market for a pelvic floor physical therapist, I also want to tell a cautionary tale. Pelvic floor has become the new buzzword in health and wellness. It is what people want to portray that they offer because it is a service that is highly lacking. The problem with this is that a lot of these people are not trained in pelvic floor dysfunction. So this is not something we learn in physical therapy school. It's not something we learn in grad school. It is extensive training and training outside of a physical therapy program. So when you go, or if you're thinking about going to a physical therapy practice or clinic or physical therapist in general who says they treat pelvic floor dysfunction, you want to vet your people. When you're booking your appointment, make sure you ask if the physical therapist working with you is specifically trained in pelvic floor dysfunction and if they have working with internal assessment. So part of the exam is usually an internal exam, but this is something that you might not feel comfortable with, which is totally fine. You should never be forced into doing a part of the exam that you're not comfortable with. However, even if you do waive that part of the exam, you want somebody who is trained in internal assessment because they know what's going on internally or what could potentially be going on internally, and they have other ways of checking that without going intravaginally. So you want to make sure, again, you're going to ask the front desk, the receptionist, when you book, is the therapist I'm seeing specifically trained in pelvic floor dysfunction? Are they specifically trained in internal assessment? And you also want to know where they received that training. The 2 top heavy hitters, Herman and Wallace and the APTA. Make sure that they are trained in one of those. Those are the only 2 that I know of that train their practitioners in internal assessment. So make sure you know where you're going. Make sure that you're not wasting your time. You're not wasting your energy. If you're going somewhere that's having you do endless kegels and nothing else, you're probably not in the right spot. So drop me a line. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Please subscribe to the channel. Go down below, grab your free ebook. Let's keep spreading the word about pelvic health. It's very, very important. It's one of the most important parts of our bodies. It is our legit part of our deep core. So keep educating yourselves, keep educating each other, and thanks so much for tuning in.